Hey guys, you might remember this as my linear actuator vise build. This vise was made using an old linear actuator taken from my grandma's old lift chair, which she was throwing out. Now this right here is the second linear actuator that I salvaged from that, and what I want to do today is turn it into a tail vise for work holding on top of my bench. This is going to involve somehow mounting this unit to this end, installing a toggle switch in the side, and drilling a series of dog holes. The first thing I need to do is get this tabletop taken off and see just how I'm going to be able to mount this unit to the subframe of the table. Let's get started doing that now. Okay, with the top off and the linear actuator at full extension mode, I can now see exactly how I want to mount it. I'm going to be pressing this motor housing up against this 2x4 as much as I can, and then that leaves us in this position. What I'm thinking is I'll get a Forstner bit the same size as this shaft, drill a through hole in the right position from the top, and this will slide in this way. This joist, however, is going to be interfering, so we'll have to unscrew it and move it down to the back side, where I'll drill a clearance hole for this nub to sit in. And with those two holes, this will be totally locked in place and can't go anywhere. The clamping is going to happen between this shoulder pressing up against this joist and the pin over here. Because of that, I'm going to go ahead and put a brace between here and here, just a simple 2x4 brace. Let's go ahead and get those few things done. Okay, so everything's mounted and this guy is going nowhere fast. It's really secured in there. The next step is going to be to mount the forward and reverse switch, which I'm going to place about here. So I'm going to start by drilling a Forstner bit hole just to make room for the jigsaw blade, and then I'll trace out the rectangular shape that needs to be cut out. Same thing I did for the linear actuator vise over here. Then once that's done, I'll get it all wired up. I'll put up on screen right now a proper wiring diagram for how to do this. And I'm going to just be borrowing power from the power supply that's over there on that linear actuator. Since this all came from the same power chair anyways, it shouldn't be a problem since these aren't ever going to be used at the same time anyways. So let's get that done. Everything seems to be working fine on the electronics end of things. The next step is I want to add some bracing. I've got this piece of oak and a few pieces of 2x6 here that I'm going to add as bracing in these three sections. And that's just so when the dog pin goes in there, it's not so prone to camming out and getting loose in the hole. It's going to have a little more meat to grab into on this end of the table. Now after that, I'm going to slap the tabletop down. And then from the underside, I'm going to use a marker, Sharpie, whatever, from inside this, run the actuator back and forth, and that's going to trace out on the underside of the table where I need to cut a slot that will allow that dog pin to slide freely back and forth. Yes, the tabletop's going to end up with a slot in the top and a few holes over here, but it's a small price to pay for having this awesome clamping. So we've got the table flipped over. You can see the mark I made from the underside. We've got our fence set up here for our router to ride against. And in the router, I have a 1/2 inch flat bit, a little bit bigger than the 7/16 pin that's going to be going into the dog hole, just for a little bit of wiggle room. Also, I don't have a 7/16 bit, so this is what we get. Anyways, I'm going to be cutting this in 2 or 3 passes, lowering it about 1/4 inch at a time. You see I have my start position and my stop position. This will let me know how far I need to go, and I'll just keep pushing up firmly against the fence so it doesn't wander. The slots cut, looks good. Time to flip this over and get it re-screwed down to the table. So with the tabletop reattached, I want to move on to making the dogs. And I'm going to make them out of this 7/16 brad point bit, which is ridiculously long and the tip is severely dulled. I might have drilled into a screw. Anyways, I'm going to be using my angle grinder to cut off a couple pins, and then they're going to have a piece of wood glued onto the top of them. That's what's going to act as the stops in the vise and in the holes where you position it along the bench. Let's go ahead and get these chopped up. Both dogs are glued up, and we have the one dog, which is a little bit longer for going through the end of the vise over here. And now we need to drill holes for this guy to sit into. So I'm going to start my holes around here in the center where we move that joist over a little bit to make room for the linear actuator. And because we have about 7.5 inches of travel on the vise end of things, I've decided to go with a 6.25 inch spacing for the dog holes from here all the way to the end. That should leave us with a hole right near the end and very even spacing. And because it's less than the travel of the vise, everywhere in between should be able to be clamped, except obviously in this little space here, which I don't really see necessary. There's easier way to clamp smaller pieces, including my other vices. So we're going to start drilling the holes, and then this project's complete. Wrong way.